Okay, let's continue informing you, all to do with the tolerance against FGM. Now get this, Kenya has made progress in the fight against female genital mutilation, with only 2 out of every 10 girls now said to undergo the retrogressive cultural practice, as compared to 4 out of every 10 as witnessed back in 1998. Despite the drop in the national prevalence rate, the recently released Kenya Demographic Health Survey report of 2022 indicates that the country is not out of the woods yet in terms of fighting the vice. The number of circumcised women has increased from 9% to 12%, a type of FGM predominantly practiced in the northern counties. As Kenya joins the rest of the world to reaffirm its commitment in zero tolerance against FGM, our reporter Gloria Milimu interrogates why counties like Marsabit are still grappling with the high numbers of girls subjected to the cut and what exactly they're doing to cut back the numbers. Listen in.
Kikatonikaa miaka 7. Alafu sababu yake ilikuwa nimeambiwa nitakuwa msichana mwenye hana nidhamu.
14-year-old Noor, not her real name, a Form 2 student from Marsabit County, recounts the events of a night that was supposedly meant to tame her behavior should she experience a riot of hormones in the future. Not even her frail voice would stop the infamous old women with sharp razor blades, deemed to be enforcers of a retrogressive culture, from mutilating her genitalia that night. She added to the list of a growing number of girls and women who are subjected to this kind of gender-based violence.
Your reason, it doesn't make sense. Hata mimi hiyo siku ningekuwa na umri ya sasa kufanya decision, ningekataa kabisa.
Unlike Noor, whose fate seemed to have been sealed at a tender age, her counterpart, whom we shall call Debaso, also not her real name, is among the rising new generation of girls from the county who have rejected the cultural practice they term oppressive. Ordinarily, at 18 years, she would have already undergone the cut and even married off according to her culture. But as fate would have it, she is lucky to have been born in a family that does not embrace circumcision of women.
Hii kitu inaharibu kwanza wasichana wengi sana kwa hapa. Wengine wanakeketwa ili waweze kuolewa mapema. Na kwa sababu kama hujakeketwa, ni kama msichana ambaye hujakomaa.
Despite her stand, she faces criticism and a darting eye from some members of her community, especially her peers.
Wanatuambia nyinyi si wale wasichana, nyinyi mtaenda kusunguka na vijana kwa sababu hujakeketwa. Lakini sisi bado tuko sawa.
For parents who have lived the experience and were forced to subject their daughters to the cut, like this woman whom we shall call Kabali to protect her identity, it was perhaps too late for her firstborn daughter, but the sensitization and enlightenment on the demerits of female circumcision has now left her an anti-FGM crusader in a community that still practices the cut, though in hiding.
Iko na wasichana wengine wadogo pia, na nimesema sita wakeketa tena.
Female genital mutilation is recognized as a violation of human rights and remains deeply rooted in some communities across the country, with counties like Marsabit registering a prevalence rate as high as 90%, translating to 9 out of every 10 girls undergoing the cut. Whereas the national prevalence rate has been on a downward trajectory, with the current prevalence rate translating to at least 2 out of every 10 girls said to have undergone the cut from the initial 4 out of every 10 witnessed in the 90s, according to the 2022 Kenya Demographic Health Survey. The percentage of circumcised women sewn and closed increased from 9% to 12% in 2014 and 2022 respectively.
Before this KDHS, we were making an annual progress of 4.3 percentage points annually. What we needed to make was 11 percentage points progress. So that tells you that we're making progress, but we will not meet the 2030 targets.
This increase is now seemingly being compounded by various issues that threaten to reverse gains made in the fight against the vice. Drought, coupled with retrogressive cultural practices, has disproportionately affected women and girls, increasing their vulnerability to vices such as female genital mutilation. Here in Marsabit, those two factors have combined to make life even more difficult for female populations. Statistics by the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, UNICEF, indicates that of the 22 high FGM burden counties in Kenya, 12, including Marsabit, are experiencing the worst drought in several years.
Cumulatively, it's like almost 10 years. We've never had rain in Marsabit. That automatically tells you that the grasses are now depleted. So far, we've lost 80% of our livestock, all the species, from camel, goats, cows, you mentioned them. The pastoralist communities in Marsabit depend on livestock for their livelihood. What happens when all these animals get wiped away by the drought? It now means parents can no longer afford to pay school fees for their kids.
Schools are not just learning environments. They're also protective environments for girls, and we saw that with COVID. So when girls drop out of schools because of this climate change and other emergencies like drought, then they're prone to vices like FGM.
Culturally, this brutal act is deemed as a rite of passage and a means to supposedly help uphold a woman or girl's chastity by controlling their sexuality. But is this often the case? The ongoing drought, on the other hand, has robbed off families of their livelihoods, increasing the risk of girls and women being used as a financial security for families hard hit. Anti-FGM campaigners like Nuria Golo, who have felt firsthand the impact of female genital mutilation and other retrogressive cultural practices that seem to undermine women's rights, uses her organization to amplify the voices of women and girls and sensitize the community on the effects of the practices.
20 years down the line, there's changes. And if you go to the schools, you'll see the enrollment of girls are now higher than the enrollment of boys, which pleases me. And of course, female genital mutilation is also, though not very much successful, something has been done.
Her mission has not gone unchallenged, but the FGM survivor remains relentless in her fight against the practice, and through such meetings, they plan how they can effectively change their community's perspective on certain traditions that fuel harmful practices that remain a threat to efforts made in reducing FGM cases in the country.
It was referred to as a women's organization, women's rights, the women fighting men, and all sorts of names. But at one point, we changed our strategy and included men in our board. We included men in our activities, men against FGM, and we succeeded.
Experts argue that fighting such vices effectively requires the roping in of people who shape the opinion of communities, like religious leaders and elders, among other cultural gatekeepers. As it struggles to cut back the numbers, Marsabit County is leveraging the use of these gatekeepers such as religious leaders, male advocates, reformed cutters to help change the community's perspective on these harmful practices. Religious leaders like Lole Said Abdallah of the Lutheran Church in Marsabit have been tasked with the mandate of sensitizing his flock apart from feeding the word of God.
In between our service muda kama dakika 15 tunafunza watu.
Kuna baadhi wanasema ni sunna, kuna watu wanasema haifai, basi sisi tunachukua kama ile haifai kukeketa wasichana wetu kwa mujibu wa dini ya Kiislamu.
Marsabit hopes that through its action plan launched today, it will be able to bridge gaps that continue to render the fight against FGM in the county futile. Kangaroo courts, on the other hand, have remained a barrier to the uptake of legal systems in the county as communities fear repercussions of reporting gender-based violence cases. Lack of political will also seem to fuel the culture as politicians shy away from condemning the act publicly due to political consequences.
Like in 2022, we only had 20 cases of GBV reported to that gender-based violence. in the county for the whole year, 12 months. Now you can imagine when you report only 20 cases in an area where we have an FGM rate at 90%. What does that tell you? People are not willing to volunteer information that can lead to apprehending of these criminals and for them to be locked behind bars.
As Kenya reaffirms its stake in upholding zero tolerance against female genital mutilation this year, experts call for urgent action and concerted effort to ensure the country at least remains on course.
Well, that report by Gloria Milimu just highlighting how Kenya has